Dozen different clicks. I'm finally there. I guess I hadn't used this computer here before. Do appreciate an opportunity to talk with you today. I'm going to run this as a class. We're going to talk about the Ten Commandments. One particular, the first commandment, to have no other gods before them. The Ten Commandments, what are they? Okay, they're part of the law.
From God.
They are from God. Are they the entirety of the law?
No.
What are they then?
Like preamble.
Yeah, they're basically the preamble. They're the prologue to the law of Moses. The rest of the law of Moses is an expansion of the principles that are brought up in the Ten Commandments. Okay, they're the foundation of the old law. And even though the law ended, 9 of those 10 commandments are still in effect. Okay? And so understanding the basics of this law then helps us understand the New Testament. If somebody could read in Romans chapter 15 and in verse 4.
For whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, so that through perseverance and the encouragement of the Scriptures we might have hope.
Okay, we're to know about the old law. Even though it's not in effect, it's still an important part of what we need to learn. And so the old law was directed to what nation? Israelites. It's not directed to everyone. In fact, as the Ten Commandments are being reviewed, anybody knows what the word Deuteronomy means? It means second reading. Okay, this is the second reading, Moses going back over Israel's histories, particularly of the law. Going back over the law so that people might understand before he passes on exactly what they had committed to doing. And in Deuteronomy chapter 5, if you look at verse 2 and 3, if somebody would read that.
The Lord our God has made a covenant with us at Horeb. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, with all of those of us alive here today.
Yeah, and it's important to understand. This is new. This was not something that had been in existence prior to this. And it wasn't for any other nation. It was specifically for the Israelites. And it mentions some of their circumstances that they were in, but at the same time, the principles help us understand the God who gave them this law. So in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 6 through 10.
I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other God before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, and on the third and the fourth generation of these who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments.
Okay, so why did God tell the Israelites they're to have no other gods but him? Because he's a jealous God. And he also gives another point at the beginning in verse 6.
I brought you out of the bondage in Egypt.
Yeah, I'm the one who brought you out of Egypt. In fact, we're going to expand on that in the lesson during service. But he says, I'm the one who brought you out. So therefore, you need to follow me. And I'm a jealous God. You won't have any other gods before me. And so this becomes the first commandment. It's a cornerstone. In fact, take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. And somebody read that.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates.
Now, one of the things in that beginning verse, it says the Lord your God is one. In Hebrew, there are different types of ones. And in English, we use the same word for multiple meanings. Okay, this particular word is one for united. It is not one in count. It is one united. Okay, the Lord your God is one. And because of that, he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That's the one that Jesus quotes. Go ahead and read Matthew 22, verse 37.
And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind.
Yeah, this becomes then, Jesus says, the foundation. This is the first commandment. This is the principal commandment that everything else is built on. It's the foundation of the old law. It's basically also the foundation of the new law. God is the one we are to love with everything and all our being. Okay? But then to understand a law, we have to understand its terms. Okay? So what is a God? What you worship, yes. Okay? In fact, any person or thing that you conceive to have superior power over you, that is worthy of worship and honor and praise and exaltation, that's the definition of what a God is. Okay? Now, we often think of gods as something in the past, but there are gods today. Okay? For instance, what other religions are there out there that have gods? The Hindus, they have thousands of gods. Okay. Some of the, the Buddhists. The Buddhist God is kind of vague, but they do have a God. Some of the religions have ancestor worship, which then the ancestors to basically become their gods. Okay, so there are outright ones like that. And there are also some who claim to follow the God of the Bible. But if you look at the description of their God, it's completely different from the God that's in the Bible, like the Muslims. The Muslims say, oh, we follow the same God as the Jews and the Christians do. No, they don't. Their God, which they call Allah, has a completely different description than what the God that's mentioned in the Bible is. Okay? So, and sometimes we find gods in unexpected places. Sometimes we find people making gods out of other things. Maybe not intentionally, but they still treat them like gods. In fact, we use that in our language. We idolize sports heroes, and other famous people. We give them praise and we give them honor. Okay, people get short of breath in the presence of somebody really famous, and with somebody they admired for their superior skills for some reason. And sometimes it's material things that captures a person's attention. There's people who make wealth into a god. And what we mean by that is that everything else is sacrificed to place money as the number one top activity. It's what controls their choices, is how much money can they make from it. And in that sense, it becomes their God. But God is more than just putting somebody in a place of honor or importance. See, when we talk about making something a God, we're saying that that person or that thing you believe has power to direct and control your life. Okay? For instance, there are people who think that however the stars and planets align, that somehow controls their life. That's a God. Okay? Some people call on psychics to help them make decisions. They're idolizing that. They're saying that they have some connection to some God, in a sense, even though they may not claim it. But that's what they're doing. They're letting this control their life. Superstitions often control people's lives. Whether it's avoiding stepping on a crack, or wearing a lucky hat for a game. I can't play without my lucky hat, right? Otherwise we won't win. Well, wait a minute. Hats don't control your game. Okay? And still others give prayers to luck as they're about to take risks. Okay? So, other gods are still with us. We just dress them up in different clothes. And we call them by new names. So the question then is, why can there be no other gods? See, man tends to make gods out of physical things, things that we experience. Take a look at Romans chapter 1 and verses 22 and 23. If somebody would like to read that.
Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures.
So have you ever looked at the old gods and even the current ones? Why do they make them look like animals or people?
So they can see.
Yeah. We don't have enough imagination to imagine something that's not already existing. We may reform it, we may reblend it, like some of the Egyptian gods had heads of one animal and a body of a person. Okay, we may blend a couple ideas, but we see things, we don't make things totally up. Is it reasonable to think that anything that's in this physical universe could make the universe? No. Okay. We have the idea of, can you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps? If you're in the universe, how can you make it? There's a little bit of a dilemma. There's a bit of a problem there. Okay? Animals cannot create something greater than themselves. We've had animals around for thousands of years. Have you ever seen an animal make something better, greater than itself? Okay? Man's able to create things, but it's never on the order of complexity of the things that's in this world and how this world functions. We're constantly getting amazed. And right now, people are getting fascinated by the complexity that's in just a single cell. It's a whole town of factories, all packed into a single cell. Okay? And many of the basic facts of this world, we still don't understand. Like how gravity actually works. We got an idea how it works, but exactly what is it? We're still kind of working on that one. Okay? Or life, even. We have yet to figure out what life is. Science has been trying to recreate life forever, and I don't think they ever will. But they're trying to understand it, and they can't figure it out. Okay? And so to claim anything fashioned by the hands of man is somehow superior to man would just be dumb. Take a look at Isaiah chapter 44. And let's read verses 9 through 20. A little bit longer reading.
Those who fashion a graven image are all of them futile, and their precious things are of no profit. Even their own witnesses fail to see or know, so that they will be put to shame. Who has fashioned a god or cast an idol to no profit? Behold, all his companions will be put to shame, for the craftsmen themselves are mere men. Let them all assemble themselves, let them stand up, let them tremble, let them together be put to shame. The man who shapes iron into a cutting tool and does his work over the coals, fashioning it with hammers and working it with his strong arm, he also gets hungry and his strength fails. He drinks no water and becomes weary. Another shapes wood. He extends a measuring line. He outlines it with red chalk. He works it with planes. He outlines it with a compass, and he makes it like the form of a man, like the beauty of a man, so that it may sit in a house. Surely he cuts cedars for himself and takes a cypress or an oak and raises it for himself among the trees of the forest. He plants a fir, and the rain makes it grow. Then it becomes something for a man to burn. So he takes one of them and warms himself. He also makes a fire to bake bread. He also makes a god and worships it. He makes it a graven image and falls down before it. Half of it he burns in the fire. Over this he eats meat as he roasts a roast and is satisfied. He also warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm. I have seen the fire." But the rest of it he makes into a god, his graven image. He falls down before it and worships it. He also prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God." They do not know, nor do they understand, for he has smeared over their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so that they cannot comprehend. No one recalls, nor is there knowledge or understanding to say, "I have burned half of it in the fire, and also baked bread over its coals. I roasted meat and ate it, and then I make the rest of it into an abomination. I fall down before a block of wood." He feeds on ashes. A deceived heart has turned him aside, and he cannot deliver himself, nor say, "Is there not a lie in my right hand?"
So Isaiah does a very thorough job of just destroying this idea of idols. Exactly why are idols not gods? Or some of the arguments he makes.
Their imagination.
There's a man's imagination. What else?
Block of wood, basically.
They're materials out of the physical world. They're wood, they're stone, they're iron, whatever, something made out of from physical materials. What else?
You use them for, besides the fact that God use them for other things too.
Yes, the materials are being used, the same material that's being used to fashion an idol is being used to cook meat. You burn it. Wood burns, so you cook your meal on it.
So how can that be something?
In fact, what he was pointing out is, the scraps as they're making their idol. They burn the scraps and cook the meat over it. Okay, so it has no special properties. Okay, and he's basically saying it's also that the person who's fashioning it, even if he's strong, he's still human. He gets hungry, he gets weak, he gets tired, and yet he creates something greater that supposedly is eternal or never gets hungry, never gets tired. But he gets hungry and tired. How can you make something that's beyond you?
Verse 10 kind of puts it in perspective. It's like, who makes an idol for no profit?
Yeah.
Why do they really make an idol?
Yes. Exactly. There's a reason behind this. Okay. Now, some people try to avoid this obvious conclusion by saying, well, it's not really the God itself. It's just an image that represents the God. And it just helps you to focus your mind on the God.
Like people use the cross.
Yes, by the way, that's exactly the argument the Catholic Church uses when they say they put up pictures and images of Jesus and God and their saints and Mary and all that other stuff. And they say, well, these aren't the actual things. They're just to help people focus their minds. So they're not really idols. Okay, they're not really gods because this is they're just representations. Now take a look at Isaiah 40, because Isaiah has something to say about that as well. In Isaiah 40, 12 to 17.
Who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and marked off the heavens by the span, and calculated the dust of the earth by the measure, and weighed the mountains in a balance, and the hills in a pair of scales? Who has directed the Spirit of the Lord, or as his counselor has informed him? With whom did he consult, and who gave him understanding? And who taught him in the path of justice, and taught him knowledge, and informed him of the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket, and are regarded as a speck of dust on the scales. Behold, he lifts up the islands like fine dust. Even Lebanon is not enough to burn, nor is beast enough for a burnt offering. All the nations are as nothing before him. They are regarded by him as less than nothing and meaningless.
So what's Isaiah's point here?
Even a great nation is not that. I mean,
Yeah, even though you take the biggest empire, they're nothing. The United States is nothing before God. Russia doesn't matter. China doesn't matter. Take whatever empire you want to. It doesn't matter to God. And he also points out what else? What was he talking about? Measuring the waters in the hollow of his hand. And
Yeah, so big, so large, hard to comprehend.
you can't measure it, right?
yeah, we estimate things, but we never actually measure. Okay, and these are the works of God. We don't know. We can't fully comprehend precisely what God did. So how do you represent? As we said, these idols are just representations. They're not the real. Well, wait a minute. How can you represent something that has infinitely more knowledge than you do? Whose power is far greater than anything you can even imagine.
You can only fall short.
Yeah. Okay. Take a look at it in 18 to 20 of the same Isaiah 40.
To whom then will you liken God, or what likeness will you compare with him? As for the idol, a craftsman casts it, a goldsmith plates it with gold, a silversmith fashions chains of silver. He who is too impoverished for such an offering selects a tree that does not rot. He seeks out for himself a skillful craftsman to prepare an idol that will not totter.
Okay? So basically the question is, how can anything represent God? You really can't. You're picking out material things to represent a God with infinite knowledge. Material has no knowledge. Okay? And it has no power. Okay? And some of those idols, he said, they pick out wood. Why did they pick out wood?
There's a lot of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of it.
This also says he's too impoverished to.
Yeah, it's all he can afford. I can't afford metal and stone, so I'll use wood. Wait a minute, you're trying to talk about, was this supposed to represent the greatness of God? I'm too cheap to use anything but wood. There's a problem here. Okay? And then verses 21 to 26.
Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been declared to you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is He who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He it is who reduces rulers to nothing, who makes the judges of the earth meaningless. Scarcely have they been planted, scarcely have they been sown, scarcely has their stock taken root in the earth, but He merely blows on them and they wither, and the storm carries them away like stumble. To whom then will you liken me, that I would be His equal, says the Holy One. Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these stars, the one who leads forth their hosts by numbers. He calls them all by name because of the greatness of His might and the strength of His power. Not one of them is missing.
Okay, and so Isaiah's point is God's too mighty, God is too powerful. What can you possibly use to represent God? You can't. And yet they said, what are you going to liken me to? You're going to liken him to a cow? Well, the Israelites did that, to a calf, not even a full-grown cow. That somehow represents God? And that's what God's trying to get across. This is your very idea is foolish. God's greater than all of this, bigger than all of this. In fact, take a look at what Paul says in Acts 17 in verse 29. He's talking to the Athenians who have idols for everything. And in Isaiah 17 and verse 29.
Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by art and man's devising.
God's divine nature cannot be something physical. It just won't represent who God is. Okay, this is one of the reasons why God refused the Israelite to create an object to represent Him. There is nothing in this universe that can trap the concept of God. Okay, and in fact, take a look at 1 Corinthians 12 and in verse 2.
You know that when you were pagans, you were led astray to the mute idols, however you were led.
How come he calls them mute idols?
They can't speak.
Yeah, they can't speak.
Can't see.
Yeah, they can't do anything. They're just blocks of wood, lumps of steel, whatever they're made out of, stone. They have no abilities. And they can't talk, unlike the real God. In fact, Revelation 9 and verse 20.
And the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, so as not to worship demons and the idols of gold and of silver, of brass and of stone and of wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk.
Yeah. These idols, they can't see, they can't hear, they can't walk. They're not living. Okay? God is a living being. We're made in the image of God. We're not representing God by using something that's from man's hand that doesn't live. Okay? In fact, God's proven that he's not like any idol. Take a look at Psalms 135, Psalms 135, and we're going to read verses 5 through 18.
For I know that the Lord is great, and that our Lord is above all gods. Whatever the Lord pleases, he does in heaven and in earth, in the seas, in all the deeps. He causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He makes lightnings for the rain. He brings forth the wind from his treasuries. He smote the firstborn of Egypt, both of man and beast. He sent signs and wonders into your midst, O Egypt, upon Pharaoh and all his servants. He smote many nations and slew mighty kings, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, and all the kingdoms of Canaan. And he gave their land as heritage, a heritage to Israel, his people. Your name, O Lord, is everlasting, your remembrance, O Lord, throughout all generations. For the Lord will judge his people and will have compassion on his servants. The idols of the nations are but silver and gold, the work of man's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. They have eyes, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear, nor is there any breath in all of their mouths. Those who make them will be like them. Yes, everyone who trusts in them.
Okay, what does this mean that all who make them will be like them?
They don't see, they don't hear. They don't
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they'll end up being dead. But it also means basically those who are following after these idols, they don't see the craziness that they're involved in. They don't hear of any objections to it. You know.
Yeah, the idol can't prove them wrong.
Yeah, the idol won't prove them wrong, but they won't hear of anything else. But they're blind to everything else. But how does God prove himself to be greater than all these false idols?
His creation and everything.
Okay, through his creation, but it specifically mentions something in here. In 135, Psalm 135.
Said he will judge his people.
He would judge his people, but it also talks about his judgments on Egypt, on Shihan, on Og.
He's proven himself.
Hmm?
Over and over again, he's proven
Yes,
himself.
over and over again, he's proven himself. You know, he's shown that any of the other nations, their God. We're studying 1 Samuel right now in La Vista, and you know the Philistines go and capture the ark. And anybody remember what happened to Dagon, their idol?
Fell down.
It keeps falling down before the ark. In fact, the last time it fell down, head and hands got chopped off right at the threshold. You know, it kept falling down before God. And God started plaguing them. And what's fascinating is the Philistines said, hey, we got to get rid of this thing. Otherwise, we're going to be like the Egyptians. And I find very fascinating because you know how long ago that was? From 1 Samuel to the Egyptians, to the plagues? It was over 400 years.
But they remember.
They still talk about what happened to the Egyptians 400 years later. That's how devastating what God did to them. And that's what God's saying. I've proven that I'm not like one of these idols. Okay? And so, no creation of man is going to be able to control man's destiny. Take a look at Isaiah 46. I'm going to read that one. Isaiah 46, starting with verse 1. Bel has bowed down, Nebo stoops over. Their images are consigned to the beast and the cattle. The things that you carry are burdensome, a load for the weary beast. They stooped over, they have bowed down together. They cannot rescue the burden, but they themselves have gone into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel. You have been born by me from birth, and have been carried from the womb. Even to your old age I will be the same, and even to your graying years I will bear you. I have done it, and I will carry you, and I will bear you, and I will deliver you. To whom would you liken me, and to make me equal and compare me? What will we be alike? Those who lavish gold from the purse and weigh silver on the scale hire goldsmiths, and he makes it into a god. And they bow down, indeed, they worship it. They lift it up on the shoulder and carry it. They set it in its place, and it stands there. It doesn't move from its place. Though one may cry to it, it cannot answer. It cannot deliver him from his distress. Remember this and be assured. Recall to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things long past, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there's no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things which not have been done, saying, my purpose will be established and I will accomplish all my good pleasure. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my purpose from a far country. Truly I have spoken, truly I will bring it to pass. I have planned it and surely I will do it. What's God's point?
His promises are not idle. He will
Yeah.
do whatever he says he will do it. They're not just empty threats.
Yes, he does everything, whatever he says he does. And he accomplishes it because who controls everything? He does. He'll make it happen. One way or the other, he'll make it happen. He has full control. The idols just sit there. They're just a lump of stone. They just don't do anything. In fact, he says, look at it. You guys have to take care of your idols. You got to carry it everywhere. You got to move it everywhere. You got to. And he turns around and says, but I'm the one who's been carrying you people. I'm the one who's been moving you places and taking care of you and doing all these things. Okay, so whether we talk about material things or philosophies that men have devised, science has eased our lives, but it hasn't changed the nature of men. People are still people. Psychology doesn't solve problems. It doesn't absolve guilt. Okay? Nothing man has done can save him. Take a look at Jeremiah chapter 2 and in verse 28. Jeremiah 2:28. Where are your gods which you have made for yourselves? Let them arise if they can save you in the time of your trouble. For according to the number of your cities are your gods, O Judah. Judah had so many gods. He said, however many cities Judah has, that's how many gods they had. He says, let them save you. Let's just prove this. Because it's not going to change what God has declared. And every god that man has created for himself fails one basic test. It's in Isaiah chapter 57 and in verse 13. When you cry out, let your collection of idols deliver you. But the wind will carry them all up, and a breath will take them away. But he who takes refuge in me will inherit the land and possess my holy mountains. Just ask them to do something and just see if they actually do it. And the answer is they never do. No other God exists. Everything is imagination of wayward man. In 1 Corinthians chapter 8, 1 Corinthians 8, starting at verse 4, therefore concerning the eating of things sacrificed to idols, we know that there is no such thing as an idol in the world, and that there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father from whom all things, and we exist for him, and one Lord, Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we exist through him. In fact, this is what Jehoshaphat acknowledged in his time of distress in 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles chapter 20. And starting at verse 5. And then Jehoshaphat stood up in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem, in the house of the Lord before the new court. And he said, O Lord, the God of our fathers, are you not God in heavens? And are you not the ruler over all the kingdoms and the nations? Power and might are in your hand, so that no one will stand against you. God proved his might in creating the world, in destroying the world during the flood, in controlling events, both present and in future times. This is the God who sent Christ into the world to save us. In 1 John chapter 4. First John chapter 4, and starting at verse 9. By this the love of God was manifested in us, that God sent his only begotten Son into the world so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we love God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought to also love one another. No one has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in him, and he in us, because he has given us his Spirit. We have seen and testified that the Father has sent the Son to be the Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him, and he in God. And we come to know and have believed the love which God has for us. God is love. And the one who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this love is perfected with us, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment. Because as he is, so also are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfected love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment, and the one who fears is not perfected in love. We love because he first loved us. This is the God. God is not so far above us that we don't enter into his thoughts. He cares for us. He cares for you. And that's what we got to understand. We have a God unlike anything else, but it can't be represented. We have a God who actually works and cares and does things on our behalf. That's what God has proven over the years. We'll pause there. I'm going to continue this idea in